Hello everyone, this is Svetlana. I'm very glad you could join me today. In this video, I will be making a card featuring holiday cookie baking situation. For my card, I will be using the Peace, Love, Joy stamp set from Altenew. This is a new set from the October 2018 release. It has several shapes, holiday shapes, I would say. Some of them can be used as layers of the same shape to create a multicolored image. But also almost all of these stamps can be used separately. And there is a set of matching dies for this stamp set as well. When I first saw this set, these shapes immediately reminded me holiday cookies, and I decided to make a card featuring a cookie baking scene. To be honest, it's not the first time I'm making this design. I made several of such cards in the past, and this time I decided to film a video for this technique. I will be white embossing this heart onto a parchment cardstock, and I'm using my Misty tool for stamping. I'm applying some baby powder onto my cardstock to prevent embossing powder from sticking in the areas where I don't want it to be. Next, I'm inking up the stamp with the Altenew clear embossing ink, stamping it, adding Altenew pure white embossing powder, and heat setting it. By the way, I forgot to mention that now I'm making a cookie. That's why I'm using a parchment cardstock, so it looks like a cookie. And the white embossing would be cookie icing. I decided to add another coat of white embossing on top to make the white embossing look more like icing. Of course, using a stamp positioning tool comes in handy uh, when it comes to double stamping, but it's an optional step. I just like to overthink sometimes, and by sometimes I mean always, of course. Now I want to brown my cookie. To do this, I will be blending some Altenew Mocha dye ink on top. I'm wiping off the ink residue from the white embossing, and next I will go ahead and die cut this heart using the coordinating die. To finish off this cookie, I'm adding some more shading around its edges. Next, I will be making another cookie using this snowflake stamp, and I will be making it in the same manner by white embossing first, double white embossing second, ink blending, and die cutting. So I made a couple of cookies, and now it's time to make a baking table. I made an A2 card base out of parchment cardstock, and I have a piece of scrap paper about the same size, which I temporarily adhering onto the card back using the Altenew tape runner. This piece of printer paper will protect my card back from getting inky. To make the table surface, I will be using the Altenew wood palette background stamp set. I'm placing it onto my desk, stamping side up. And I didn't even remove it from the packaging. I just peeled off the acetate sheet that was on top. Now I'm inking the stamp up with the Altenew Espresso dye ink. Next I'm placing my card on top, covering with a sheet of printer paper and giving it a good rub with my fingers. It's an old school premisty, if you will, technique of stamping with background stamps, but it works very well. By rubbing it with fingers, I'm pressing the cardstock to the stamp, uh, making the ink to transfer onto the cardstock. And this sheet of printer paper protects my fingers from getting inky, and also somehow it helps to keep my card in place so it doesn't move while I'm rubbing. Now I will be blending the same espresso dye ink onto the card, covering the whole surface. I'm using a non-stick mat here, and it has a slick surface on which the ink blending tool moves very smoothly. But the ink is transferred onto the mat as well, and as I move my card, this ink from the mat can easily be transferred onto the back side of my card. That's why I'm adhered the piece of printer paper onto the back side. You may notice in the top left corner of the screen that I have a hard die cut with no white embossing on top. I had this idea to have one cookie as a work in process, so to speak, baked but with no icing just yet, but I ended up not using it on my cart as it didn't really fit. Okay, after I finish blending, I'm removing the printer paper very carefully. You just want to peel it slowly and you won't end up with torn paper. And I'm rubbing off any adhesive residue with my fingers. Here I recommend using an eraser. First of all, it will be much faster and easier to remove the adhesive. Also, if you get your fingers inky, you won't risk smudging this ink onto your card. I don't know what I was thinking. To be completely honest, my fingers are always inky, and I risked a big deal here, removing the adhesive using fingers. Okay, so I also trimmed the card top and bottom edges, as it happened to be a bit taller than the background stamp I was using. Next, I will be clear embossing the sentiment. I'm deciding where would be a better place for it, and here you can see that I'm trying to make this cookie with no icing work, but as I mentioned already, it actually didn't. After I decided on the sentiment position, I went ahead and clear embossed it. Next, I will be adding some flour to my baking table by spraying it with the Altenew Pure White Ink Spray. Altenew sprays give very good coverage, and in this case I don't want this coverage, as I don't want to hide that wooden background that I just made. I'm spraying kind of aside of my card, so the card is located on the edge of the sprayed area. In cases like this, there is a golden rule. You can always add more, but you cannot remove what was already added. And here I'm rotating my card, adding more flour until I feel that I have enough of it. Now I'm dabbing off some ink residue from the clear embossed sentiment. Next, I will be removing the clear embossing by ironing it off. I'm going for the look of a word written with a finger in flour. So I need to remove the clay embossing, which has shine and relief, which you won't find in written in flower word. And also removing the clay embossing will reveal the area trapped underneath, which was protected from the white spray. So here I covered my card with a sheet of scrap printer paper and ironing it. So you can see that clay embossing melted and transferred onto the printer paper. And look at the sentiment now. Nice and crisp with no signs of flour. And now I just need to assemble my card. I decided to add here baker's twine onto my card to add more of this holiday baking feel. I'm adhering it using a Ranger multi-medium matte liquid adhesive. It's very strong and dries clear. I'm just adding small droplets in the areas where I want to fixate my twine, and then placing an acrylic block on top to press it down. And I'm doing this in several spots along the twine route, so it holds the shape I want. But I definitely didn't adhere it along the full length of the twine. Lastly, I mounted my cookies onto the cart using black thin foam squares and added several snow crystals. And that finished off my card. Hope you like this idea of holiday baking scene and will give it a try. Thank you for stopping by today. Bye.